Did y'all hear about the paranormal experience Mr. Ballin had? The most recent one? No? Me neither. Let's watch.
Wait till you hear what I saw in my bed last night. So, I sleep in a different room than my wife because I sleepwalk. I have for a number of years. I, most nights, leap out of bed thinking somebody's trying to kill me, and I will bolt to the door. As you can imagine, that's very disruptive for my poor wife. And so, a few years ago, we just started having me sleep in the guest room, and, that's the way we've done it. So, last night was no different. Here's the room I'm sleeping in. It's the guest room. I sleep right here. There's a pillow that separates me and where my dog typically sleeps right there. She just bolted out of the room, but she normally sleeps on that blanket right there.
Okay, he said the dog just bolted out of the room because I was wondering. I was like, what's that noise that I just heard?
And this is where I sleep. And so last night I go to bed at about 9:30 and I wake up at about 10:30, somewhere in there. And normally, again, when I sleepwalk, it's like in the first hour after I fall asleep and I'm like out of bed running. But I woke up at like 10:30 and I didn't do that. I just sort of suddenly woke up. It's dark in my room. There's no noise machine on. And I look over towards the bathroom, which is that room right there. It's hard to do it in the camera right there. This is the bathroom, okay? I look towards the bathroom. The door is open and I see there is like a figure standing right there, like a person. And I just told myself I must be sleepwalking. Now, I don't hallucinate when I sleepwalk, but I have enough sleep disturbances that I'm thinking, okay, I gotta be sleepwalking. That's all this is.
He's saying that he doesn't hallucinate when he sleepwalks. I would think it would be the opposite. I thought that all sleepwalkers were doing some degree of hallucinating. Like they would see stuff or do things in their sleepwalking state that they don't remember in their awakened state, which would, to me, would be some degree of a hallucination. Like what we see from the other woman, I can't think of her, Selena Spooky Poo. What we see from Selena Spooky Poo looks like some degree of hallucination because she has these crazy adventures where she's talking to people and having full blown conversations, and she doesn't remember any of it when she wakes up.
And I'm staring at this figure in the bathroom, and they're like right here, and they appear to be staring at me or something, and I'm looking over at them, and they vanish behind this door, and they just kind of disappear. Candidly, I wasn't overly frightened. I was like, okay, I'm accustomed to weird stuff in my sleep. That's all this was. My mind's playing tricks on me. No big deal. So I don't even get up to investigate. I just go back to sleep. However, by about 11 o'clock, I wake up a second time. Historically, I do not sleepwalk twice in a night. It is always one time, really pronounced, usually in the first hour after I fall asleep. I fell asleep, around 9:30 or so. Now it's 11 o'clock, and I'm waking up for a second time. So statistically, it's not sleepwalking. I wake up, I'm right here on my back. My dog Maggie's right over there. She's asleep. And I'm laying there, and I'm not jumping out of my bed running. I'm just laying there. The room is dark. There's no noise machine on. It's just like still. And I just have this weird feeling that, I don't know, something just feels weird. And I look over at the bathroom again. There it is. And no one's there. And I'm just like, what's going on? What's happening? And I start to feel something rubbing against the side of my left thigh. I'm on my back right here, right? And I'm thinking like, is that Maggie, my dog? And I look, and Maggie's right next to me, so that would be the side she'd be on. But Maggie's not moving. She's dead asleep. And I'm thinking maybe it's like the pillow next to me. Maybe she's pushing against the pillow that's touching my leg. But no, she's completely still. There's nothing moving. And as I'm looking at Maggie, I'm feeling this thing kind of almost moving down my leg. I'm feeling something distinctly against my leg, sort of moving down. And I'm like, what is that? And I'm thinking about the figure I saw in the bathroom a little while ago. I'm starting to get scared. So I jump out of bed. I flip the light on. My covers are kind of flipped like that. And I'm standing right here. And I'm sort of surveying the room and looking at my bed like, am I sleepwalking? Like, what's happening here? Maggie's still totally asleep. And I notice there's this lump under my covers, right about here. And it's not moving. It's just a lump right here.
Does he have cats? Could have been a cat. I feel like it could have been a cat. Hold on.
Staring at it, because it's about in the same place where whatever it was touching my leg. And it sort of moves a little bit, and I'm thinking, oh, it's got to be a cat. A cat got in my room. I have 4 other cats. You know, it's totally possible one of them got in here. And I'm like, oh, phew. And so I reach down, and I begin to lift the blankets up to see which cat it is. And when I do, this lump, it quickly, like, kind of bolts to the other side of the bed, still under the covers. And now it's, like, right over at that far corner there. And it moved. It moves so quickly that I have sort of geriatric cats. I have 1 kitten, but it wouldn't have been her. I'm thinking it must be the other 3 cats that are older that would make that big of a lump. You know, the kitten's too small. And I'm thinking, like, they can't move like that. I've never seen my cats move like that. And so I'm now hesitating, but I'm like, I gotta see what's under here. And so I grab the cover again, and I'm pretty scared, honestly, at this point. I don't know what this thing is. I'm thinking, like, did a raccoon get in here? And all at once, I flip the covers up, and I look into the corner of the bed, and in that corner, looking at me, is a pair of eyes, looking right at me, and then they just sort of disappear on the back side of the bed.
Hey, is it just me, or am I the only one that's really enjoying this style of storytelling from Mr. Mrballen? Yo, I like this. I like this a lot. It's like his usual storytelling, which we're going to do one of those videos right after this clip, don't worry. But it's like that, but at the same time, it's a stories that he experienced. It's more real. It's almost like when I went to go see him in person and he was telling stories on stage. Oh, man, this is good.
And I'm like, was that a cat? Like, what was that? And I run over here, and there's nothing. Like, there's nothing here. I look under the bed. There's nothing down there. There's nothing. Like, there's no explanation for it. I gotta be honest, I'm still sort of freaked out by it. I'm convincing myself that I must have been sleepwalking and hallucinating because I do have crazy stuff that's happened in my sleep. This felt real. So, aliens.
Aliens, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly how I would have ended that too, because, you know, aliens are real. Ah, man. Since we're here in good fashion, it would only be right for us to watch a Mr. Mrballen storytelling video. Let's begin. All right, y'all. This video of Mr. Mrballen's is titled Death Finds a Way, Places You Cannot Go. Let's watch.
Today, we're going to look at 3 places you can't go and people who went there anyways. So, if that's of interest to you, please gift the like button a brand new puzzle, but don't tell them you've secretly removed 2 of the pieces. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. Just before midnight on August 20th, 2012, a 19-year-old college student named Rose Marr and her best friend, 19-year-old Elizabeth Nass, walked down Main Street in their hometown of Ellicott City, Maryland. It was their last night together before they each would head back to college in separate states. And so to cap off what had felt like a perfect summer, they decided to grab a few beers, despite being underage, and head on over to their favorite hangout spot, a train trestle that ran over Main Street. A train trestle is literally a bridge, but for trains. Now, to be clear, this train trestle was not like some secret daredevil hideout spot. Lots of people knew about it. Lots of kids in town, including Rose and Elizabeth, had been up here many, many times. And while there was an active train track that ran across it, the ledge on the trestle where everybody would sit when they were up there was several feet away from the tracks, kind of safely out of the way. You could be up there looking down over the town, and a train could literally pass right by you and not affect you. So overall, it was safe. So Elizabeth and Rose climbed up onto the train trestle and took their seats along the ledge, safely away from the tracks. And then they cracked open a few beers and began talking about their upcoming semesters. They talked about which classes they were going to take and what they were looking forward to and really how much they were going to miss each other. And then at some point, Rose pulled out her phone and she took a photo of her and Elizabeth's feet dangling off the trestle. Basically, the photo captured their feet kind of hovering over Main Street. Then she posted that photo to Twitter, and then as soon as she hit post, she and Elizabeth heard this loud screeching sound coming from right behind them. They turned around to see what it was, something huge smashed into them, and then it went black. That loud screeching sound was the sound of a train passing by right behind them. But remember, the tracks are set far enough back that, the train, it couldn't hit them. And in this case, the train was not the thing that hit these two girls. Instead, it was something truly unfortunate that happened to them. When that train passed by the girls, it partially derailed. Not a full scale, like cars going everywhere off the tracks, but instead, several of these cars basically toppled over to their sides. And some of those cars that toppled over were carrying thousands of pounds of coal. And these were open cars. You can literally see the coal as the train goes by. And so as the train's going by, those cars topple, all this coal comes out, and the coal smashed into Rose and Elizabeth and fully buried them. It was like they were under an avalanche, but not of snow, of coal. And so by the time the girls were pulled out of the coal, they were already dead. Rose and Elizabeth were the only two fatalities from this derailment. Their families would later sue the railroad company, alleging negligence, and each family would receive a settlement, though the exact amounts were never disclosed.
Wow. Oh my God. Before we move on, oh my goodness, the stories you hear about that would go unheard if it wasn't for Mr. Ballin, as far as the majority of us, right? A lot of us wouldn't hear these stories otherwise. My God, R.I.P. to those girls. What an unfortunate time to be there when that derailment of that train occurred. Man, it was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the wrong time. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry to hear that, man.
At 6 p.m. on October 27th, 2014, a 17-year-old boy named Jesus Meneses was playing basketball with a group of friends on an outdoor basketball court at Kinloch Park in Miami, Florida. The friends had broken up into two teams and were in the middle of a very intense pickup game. And the game was pretty close, and Jesus' team was doing pretty well. But at some point, when Jesus and his team had possession, one of his teammates just got frazzled by the defense and just took this crazy three-point shot from way behind the line, and the ball just sailed right past the hoop, completely missed it, air ball, and it bounced and then went clean over this chain-link fence on the edge of the park. And as soon as this happened, Jesus and all of his friends let out a collective groan, because they knew basically anything that went over that fence was pretty much gone forever. But to Jesus' surprise, one of his friends turned to Jesus and was like, hey, why don't you just hop the fence and go get the ball? Now, Jesus really did not want to do that. I mean, he had been coming to this park since he was like 1 year old with his family, and his mom and dad had always told him to never, ever climb that fence. Never. But now, Jesus' friend who had asked him to do this had kind of like turned it into a dare. And he's like, no, really, come on, Jesus, like, go hop the fence and get the ball. And the other friends had kind of picked up on this, and they were kind of egging it on, being like, yeah, Jesus, go over there, get the ball. And so Jesus knew, like, this is not a good idea. I cannot go over that fence. But here I am, surrounded by all my peers, basically egging me on to go do it. And he didn't want to look weak or scared. And so he's thinking to himself, hey, what's the worst that could happen? And he's like, all right, I'll go get it. And so Jesus left the basketball court and walked over to this fence. And it was about 7 feet tall, and there was all this barbed wire across the top of it. And so as he's standing there looking at the fence, he turns back around, and his friends are all smiling, like, yeah, go get it. And so he's like, okay. And he begins climbing the fence. And he gets to the top, and he reaches the barbed wire, and he very carefully positions himself so he doesn't cut himself on the way over. And right after he's cleared the barbed wire, he kind of tumbles to the other side of the fence. He hits the ground, and he's kind of shaken up from hitting the ground pretty hard. But, he stands up, dusts himself off. He realizes he's okay, and he turns and looks through the fence now at his friends, and they're all cheering him on. And so now, Jesus is feeling really confident, and he kind of smiles at his friends like he's the hero now. And he turns, and sure enough, there's the basketball, just a few feet away. So he walks over, picks up the basketball, and chucks it over the fence back to his friends. And Jesus was about to climb over the fence and go rejoin his friends when he happened to look back in the direction of where his basketball had been, and he noticed there was another basketball that somebody else had lost over this fence. Except this basketball was on the other side of a second fence. Basically, once you climb this first fence, a couple of feet later, there is a second fence. These were the two fences that Jesus and everybody who ever came to this park were warned about. Never climb them. But Jesus has already climbed the first one, and he's got his basketball, and he's thinking, I can climb the second one too, and I can get that basketball, and then we'll have two. So if we ever lose another one, we have a backup. So, without even telling his friends, Jesus walks over to the second fence, which is basically identical to the first fence, about 7 feet tall, a bunch of barbed wire at the top, and he carefully climbs to the top, and he kind of positions himself over the barbed wire, and then he drops down to the other side, except this time, when he hits the ground after clearing that second fence, something horrible happens. Within seconds of Jesus landing inside of that second fenced-in area, his friends back on the court saw what was going on and began totally panicking. They're screaming, they're running around, they don't know what to do. Eventually, one of them would call 911, and then minutes later, first responders show up and they find Jesus' friends. They're totally frantic. They're all pointing toward the fenced-in areas. And the first responders, they look and they know right away there's virtually nothing they can do to save Jesus. The reason these fences were totally off limits, the reason Jesus' family specifically warned him from when he was a young kid to never ever climb them, was because inside of the second fenced-in area was an electrical power grid. And there were signs all over these two fences warning people to stay back, that it was dangerous, no trespassing, like fatalities will occur if you go in here. But Jesus ignored the warnings, and he climbed the first fence, and he climbed the second fence. Except when he landed inside of that second fenced-in area, he landed on a live electrical wire. And the second he did, 500,000 volts of electricity coursed through his body. For reference, the average lightning bolt contains about 300,000 volts of electricity. So as soon as Jesus hit that wire, it was like the equivalent of 2 lightning bolts striking him at once, but not just one time, over and over and over again. And so unfortunately, Jesus died almost immediately.
R.I.P. Jesus. Jesus, you were dumb. You were dumb, Jesus. You know better. You knew good and well that you wasn't supposed to climb. Who in their right mind would egg somebody on to climb a fence like that, knowing what's on the other side? And who in their right mind would do it? That was dumb. That was real dumb. Man, peer pressure, it could kill you.
On the afternoon of April 22nd, 2023, a 49-year-old father of 3 named Artofkickz crawled through a cave system in Cumbria, England. He was on his hands and knees, shuffling his way forward, and the only light that guided him through this tight, small tunnel was the headlamp on his head. So Carl was an adventurer. He loved things like rock climbing and exploring caves, but this particular cave, he wasn't that familiar with. He'd only been here a couple other times, and he didn't have a map, so really he didn't actually know where he was going. But Carl wasn't remotely worried, because he knew this was easily the safest cave system he had ever explored. In fact, this place was so safe that often people showed up with their kids and let them run around freely with no fear they were going to get hurt. And so Carl has no worries here. And also he's thinking to himself, he's not very far into this particular tunnel. He can actually still hear the other people and their kids kind of right behind him. And so again, even though he doesn't really know where he is, he feels completely fine. And so Carl continued crawling through this tunnel, and eventually he reached this T intersection where he just had to choose between going right and left. And again, he's got no map. He doesn't really know where he's going. So he decides, okay, I'll just go right. And so he begins going down this tunnel, which closely resembled the tunnel he had just came from. But as he was crawling along, he started to feel like the walls around him were kind of shrinking, and it was getting harder and harder to push his body through this tunnel. And then finally, when it felt like it was so tight around him and it was getting so claustrophobic that maybe he should just turn around, he reached a dead end. That's all this was. The right turn was just a dead end. And so he thought, okay, I'll just turn around and go back the way I came and, maybe explore the left side. So in order to do that, Carl decided he would make a U-turn with his body. He would literally just turn around and go back the way he came, leading with his head and his upper body. And so he's facing the dead end. He's on his hands and knees, and he begins doing this U-turn. And he kind of turns and gets his head and his shoulders and his upper half kind of folded around until they're looking back in the direction he was coming. But he was too physically big to get his lower half to complete the U-turn. And so he was effectively wedged in this U-shaped position. He couldn't do anything. He was just stuck. But Carl didn't panic.
Pause. As soon as he said that he had to do a U-turn, everything that he's saying is what I was hoping wouldn't happen. I was like, his body is U-turning, meaning he's going to end up like, I was like, no, that's my biggest fear. Like, for one, going in places like this, the walls and stuff shrinking around you, there's a possible dead end, no way to get out on the other end, and you can't turn around, you're stuck, you're by yourself. Biggest fear unlocked. No way of calling for help. Who in their right mind does this stuff? Oh my God. Like, I would not do that alone, let alone would I do it at all, because not me. I wouldn't. I'd be the friend that sit back and watch if you want to go, and so I can call for help if something happened, but I'm not going. Man.
Because he knows this is a safe place. This is not a big deal. Nobody gets hurt in these cave systems. And I just need to rethink how I go back the way I came. Clearly, this U-turn attempt is not working. And so he decides, okay, let's reset. I'll pull my shoulders and my upper body back, and I'll reset facing the dead end. I'll basically go back to exactly the position I was just in. Except when he tried pulling his upper body and his head and his shoulders back to where he was facing the dead end, he realized he was also stuck going in that direction. He couldn't go back to the way he was, and he couldn't return in the direction he had come. He was stuck in this U-shape and couldn't go anywhere. Now, again, Carl is telling himself that it's gonna be okay. This is a safe place. Kids play here. Like, this is no big deal. I'm gonna be okay. And so he tried, to kind of shimmy himself one way or the other, but it was like no matter what he did, he just could not move out of this U-shape. And as that happened, he began to kind of panic. His heart rate began to rise. It became harder to breathe. It felt like the walls of this cave were kind of pushing down on him. And before long, he was becoming overwhelmingly claustrophobic. It just felt like the walls of this tunnel were crushing him, and he really began to panic, and he just started screaming out for help. Immediately, some of the staff who heard Carl yelling out made their way into this tunnel system and actually saw Carl. They could see him in this U-shape, totally wedged. And at first, they couldn't understand what was even happening here, but when they tried to pull him out, they couldn't get him to move. I mean, he really was totally stuck here. And so, sensing that this was a true emergency, the staff backed out and they called the fire department. And the fire department, they came out and they too could not get Carl out. He was stuck. And so pretty quickly, Carl realized all he could do here was just do his best to stay calm, because this position he was in was really restricting his breathing, not to mention, the tunnel itself is pressing down on him. And so he just tried to stay calm and kind of have measured breaths, and he kept thinking, the rescue team, they're right there. They're gonna get me out of here quickly, I know it. But much to Carl's shock, and to the shock of all the first responders, they didn't get Carl out quickly. Instead, it would take an agonizing 4 hours to finally free him. And during those 4 hours, Carl got weaker and weaker and weaker and more panicked. The instant Carl was out of the tunnel, he was rushed to the nearest hospital and admitted to the intensive care unit. And there, they would discover he had suffered all these extensive crush injuries from being in that position for so long. He had severe bone damage, organ damage, and nerve damage. I mean, he was in horrible shape. And despite heroic efforts by medical staff to try to save Carl, ultimately, he would die 8 days later from those injuries. And his death would become massive news, because it really seemed impossible that somebody could die in that cave system, because it was meant to be so safe. This cave system was not like an underground cave system where spelunkers go. No, this was a cave system for kids. It was a kid's play place. All the tunnels in the cave itself was made out of plastic, again, so kids could crawl and explore. But adults were told they too could go through those tunnels with their kids. And so Carl had gone to a birthday party for one of his kids' friends. He had brought his kids along, and being the devoted father that he was, he went right in there with his kids and was crawling all around and goofing around with the kids until, unfortunately, he got stuck.
Wow. So that was the entrance to the cave right there at the end. Let me see that. Man, this is a fake cave system designed for kids. And this man took his big old grown butt in there and got stuck. And oh my God. That is scary. Even this, I wouldn't go in there. I wouldn't let my kids go in there. No, I wouldn't. And I don't even got no kids to let go in there. And I wouldn't let them go in there. My God. That is terrifying. That is so crazy. I was hoping, like when they said that he was able to call for help and immediately they came and tried to get him out of there, I was just hoping and praying that he was going to get out safe and sound and survive. Man, the fact that he was able to make it out of there still alive with all that pain that he had to be in. My goodness, that is terrifying. Oh my God. Look, I wouldn't go in that. You kidding me? I don't even know how deep that is. That look crazy. Look. Wow. This was stressful. This is a very stressful story. And as an empath, I was feeling it as Mr. Ballen was telling it. But anyway, I'm about to get out of here. Hope you guys have a great evening. Leave your thoughts, comments, and opinions down below. And I'm going to catch y'all in the next one. See ya.